hours, bringing the overall death toll from the two-year conflict to 68,858 people, with 170,664 people wounded, according to Gaza's Health Ministry. Authorities said many victims remain trapped under the rubble as rescue teams struggle to access heavily damaged areas since the ceasefire began on October 11th. At least 226 Palestinians have been killed and nearly 600 injured. The ceasefire, intended to allow aid delivery and recovery efforts, has been repeatedly strained by isolated attacks and ongoing tensions. On the other hand, according to Israel, the remains of 3 people handed over by Hamas to the Red Cross this week do not belong to any of the hostages. This latest setback that could undermine a U.S.-brokered ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Now, for this discussion, we welcome Professor Andy Latham. He's a professor of international relations, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, what's your analysis on how is this ceasefire holding off on, as we see there's different reports of attacks and different reports of deaths coming in 4 days straight?
Well, perhaps predictably, the ceasefire, the phase 1 of the ceasefire, which involves actually not shooting at each other, but also hostage and prisoner exchanges and the delivery of aid, is under some strain and stress. There have been violations of the ceasefire, strictly speaking, on both sides. Delivery of aid has been delayed, partly because of the destroyed infrastructure. It's simply difficult to get aid where it is needed. And so it's under strain. And this latest episode, the reports of the 5 dead and the 17, add to that stress and add to the strains on this. It needs to be noted, of course, that we don't know if the 5 killed over the weekend were combatants or non-combatants, whether they were civilians or fighters. And the 17 bodies that are recovered from the rubble were killed before the ceasefire kicked in. So there's been so much damage and so much destruction visited upon the Strip that it's predictable that there will be bodies being recovered. But as they are recovered, stories about them contributes to the stresses and strains on the peace process, the ceasefire process.
And do you think that disarmament of Hamas is still feasible under this? And who do you think would be, or when do you think would be the international stabilization force would be getting in Gaza?
Well, that's not likely to happen soon. That stabilization force is not quite a traditional United Nations peacekeeping force, but it's similar in that fighting has to stop before they can interpose themselves and reassure both the Israelis and Hamas that the other side is not up to no good. So we're not quite there yet, and we're certainly nowhere near Hamas voluntarily disarming, which is a fraught process in any case. How does one verify that? What does it mean that every single fighter will give up every single weapon? That remains to be seen. So the first phase, the ceasefire and the delivery of humanitarian aid, etc., exchange of hostages and prisoners, was meant to be the easy phase. And it is turning out to be anything but. I still think we see forward motion. I still think we see possibilities for phase 2 just around the corner or over the horizon. But the easy phase is turning out to be not that easy.